What do you think of Japan tourism? Nature? The spectacular scenery? Food? When it comes to tourist attractions, Tokyo? Osaka? Kyoto? With this video, you'll feel like you've been to that place you've always wanted to go, or even a place you've never been. You can feel that kind of atmosphere. It's also a good choice for those who have been there in the past but didn't enjoy it because it wasn't explained well enough. This time, we will take up Toji Temple. Let's take a deeper look at the history and charms of Toji Temple, a famous tourist attraction in Japan. Let's talk about the history of Toji Temple first. Toji Temple is the head temple of the Shingon sect, located near Kyoto Station. It's called Kyo-go-koku-ji. This temple has two names, Toji and Kyo-go-koku-ji. The name Kyo-go-koku-ji means an esoteric Buddhist temple for the protection of the nation, but it is generally called Toji. Toji Temple was originally built as a national temple for the protection of the Heian Kyo capital, but was given to Kukai by Emperor Saga, and has flourished to this day as the head temple of the Shingon sect of Buddhism. Heian-kyo was located in what is now the city of Kyoto, and was the capital of Japan from 794 to 1869. At the end of the 8th century, two temples, Toji and Seiji, were planned on the east and west sides of Rajaman, the main gate of Heian-kyo. Toji survives, but Seiji continued to exist until the 1500s. However, the environment deteriorated due to poor drainage and the loss of inhabitants, and it fell into disrepair because it no longer received support from the imperial court. Today, only the remains of the temple remain. Emperor Saga was the 52nd emperor of Japan, reigned between 809 and 823. They say he was intelligent, loved to read, and had the capacity to be a monarch. Kukai, called Kobo Daishi, was a monk in the early Heian period, 794-1192, and is famous as the founder of the Shingon sect of Buddhism. Esoteric Buddhism, one of the two major schools of Buddhism, was born and developed from Mahayana Buddhism, which had been practiced in the central and eastern parts of Eurasia, by incorporating the influence of Hinduism. He is the person who systematized and introduced the Shingon sect to Japan. Until the Meiji Restoration, 1870s, it was customary for the chief of Toji Temple to hold a position that was also a high-ranking position in the Japanese Buddhist community, and he had immense authority. It has been worshipped by the common people since the Middle Ages and still survives as one of Kyoto's representative landmarks, and was registered as a World Heritage Site in 1994. The Shojinku ceremony, in which breakfast is offered as if Kukai were still alive, is still being held at Mido in Toji Temple every day early in the morning at 6 a.m. today. Also, on the 21st of every month, an antique market stands on the Toji Temple grounds and is popularly known as Kobochi. Toji Temple was destroyed by fire in a revolt in 1486 that destroyed most of the main halls and towers, including Kondo, the lecture hall, and Nandaimon, but the lecture hall was reconstructed in 1491. Although there are no buildings remaining from the time of the temple's foundation, the Nandaimon, Kondo, lecture hall, and dining hall are lined up in a straight line from south to north, and the scale of each building is the same as it was when the temple was built. The scale of each building is the same as it was when the temple was built, so you can feel the culture of the time. Kondo, which houses Buddhist statues and sutras, the most important objects of worship, was built in 823 and destroyed by fire in 1486. It was rebuilt in 1603 with the aid of Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Toyotomi Hideyoshi was the third son of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who donated money to rebuild many temples and shrines that had been devastated by war. The buildings that were rebuilt under this policy are now designated as national treasures or important cultural properties, and are highly regarded for their cultural achievements. Kondo is an Iramoya structure, so it looks like a two-story building from the outside, but it is actually a one-story building. The use of long posts to reinforce the tops of the pillars is a characteristic of the ancient Japanese style, and the extensive use of sashi hijiki to support the high ceilings also shows the characteristics of the daibutsu-sama, which was introduced from China in the 1200s. It is reported that when the kondo was rebuilt in 1603, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Hideyori's father, may have used Hukoji Temple, which was built in 1595, as a reference. This is because the appearance of the kondo of Toji Temple was very similar to the appearance of the illustration depicting Hokoji Temple at that time. The lecture hall, where monks gathered for lectures, was completed in 839, but was destroyed by fire in 1486 and later rebuilt in 1491. The auditorium is built in the Iramoya, gabled roof, style with a one-story roof, and the nageshi is an ancient Japanese style feature. Inside, 21 esoteric Buddhist statues centering on Dainichi Nyorai are neatly enshrined, comprising the oldest authentic three-dimensional mandala of esoteric Buddhist statues in Japan.
A mandala is a pictorial representation of a sect's view of the world, and is a picture that is hung during ascetic practices and ceremonies. It is a picture of various Buddhas.
Shingon Buddhism is a school of Buddhism that has Dainichi Nyorai as its principal deity. It is also characterized by its emphasis on the experience of practice and intuitive enlightenment through the use of mandala patterns. In Japan, most people deal with the main image on hanging scrolls, but there are also mandalas where the design is drawn on the ground only when necessary, and three-dimensional mandalas. There are also three-dimensional mandalas and mandalas that are painted on the ground only when necessary. In Shingon esoteric Buddhism, which spread in Japan, there are 4 types of mandalas among them, called the 4 types of mandalas. A mandala is a mandala written in Chinese or Sanskrit characters that depicts the Buddha's image as it is and expresses the world of the Buddha. It is the basis of all mandalas. The second kind is called Sanmaya mandala. It is a mandala in which Buddha is replaced by a symbol. The Ho mandala is the third kind. It is often written in letters and abstract, but it is said to represent Buddhist truths and the wisdom of the Buddha. The fourth kind is called Katsuma mandala. It is a three-dimensional representation of statues of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The three-dimensional mandala at Toji Temple also falls into this category. Since the three-dimensional mandala at Toji Temple has a unique composition of images, we do not know which sutra Kukai based his conception on and with what intention, and there has long been a controversy about its doctrinal background. In the center of the auditorium, there are 5 statues of Nyorai Buddha, 5 statues of Bodhisattvas on the right side, and 5 statues of Mu on the left side, west side. Tathagata is the highest of all Buddhas who have attained enlightenment. Bodhisattvas are beings who exist before becoming Nyorai and are said to be modeled after the Buddha in training. Mu is the second Buddha after Nyorai and Bodhisattva, and is said to have the role of guiding those who do not follow the teachings of the Buddha. Either way, many of the statues enshrined in the temple are designated national treasures and have great historical value, so it's worth a look. A 5-story pagoda is a stupa. It is a building where the body and remains of Buddha were placed. It was built to mourn the dead. The 5-story pagoda of Toji Temple is the tallest in Japan at 54.8 meters. It was built in 826, but it was destroyed by fire 4 times due to lightning and suspicious fires, and the current pagoda is the 5th generation. It was built in 1644 under the auspices of Tokugawa Iemitsu, the 3rd barbarian general of the Edo shogunate. In the center of the pagoda stands a long pillar called Shinbashira, which contains the bones of Shakyamuni, or Buddha's reliquary. According to tradition, the bones were brought back from China by Kobo Daishi Kukai, the founder of the Shingon sect of Buddhism. There are mandalas painted on the walls and pillars inside, but as a rule, they are not open to the public. The garden of Toji Temple is one of the highlights of the temple. There is a hyotan pond with a lotus planted in the center, surrounded by seasonal flowers such as plum blossoms, cherry blossoms, wisteria, red spider lilies, and maple trees. The story of why gourd ponds were created is interesting. The 5-story pagoda of Toji Temple was tilted by a strong wind, so they dug a large hole on the opposite side of the tilted direction, thinking it would return to its original position. There is an earthquake theory as to why the 5-story pagoda tilted, but Hyauteik Pond is now famous for its beautiful scenery on the Toji Temple grounds. A treasure house is a building that houses treasures and sutras. It is thought to have been built in the late 1100s and is the oldest building in Toji. The floorboards are said to have been converted from the doors of a larger building. It is said that the doors may have been converted from the doors of Kondo. It is called a zikurizukuri, and is a high floor building that is effective in controlling humidity and preventing vermin and pests. It is an architectural style of traditional warehouses. Miedo is the building where Kukai lived. I don't know when it was built, but it took its current form in 1390. It consists of 3 buildings, and it was here that Kukai conceived the 3-dimensional mandala for the auditorium and directed its construction. Today, too, the Shojinku event, in which food is offered to Kobo Daishi as if he were serving you, is still held every morning. Toji Temple has many gates, many of which are of great historical value. The first is called Nandaimon, which was built in 1601 as the west gate of Sanjusan-jindo in Kyoto City. It was relocated after the previous gate was destroyed by fire. It is about 18 meters wide and 13 meters high, and is the largest gate of Toji Temple, and is located in front of the temple. A gate called Keigamon is located on the east side of the property as a de facto entrance for worshippers. It is called Hokuso-mon, North Gate, and was built in the early 1300s. The street along this gate has remained the same width since ancient times. It is said to be the only road in Kyoto. The fourth is the Lotus Gate, which was rebuilt in the 1200s. It is said that Kukai passed through this gate to go to Koyasan, Mount Koya, in his later years. Koyasan through this gate in his later years. It is said that lotus flowers bloomed at the foot of the gate as Kukai passed through it, hence the name Lotus Gate. Lastly, the Dongdaemun Gate is famous for its non-opening. As the name suggests, the gate does not open except on special occasions. There is a story that in the past, during a time of war, people escaped by keeping the gate tightly closed. A small hole that is believed to be the remains of this practice still remains. Toji Temple is close to Kyoto Station and has great historical and cultural value, so when you visit Toji Temple, you will enjoy it more if you know the background.